Israel is bombing and shooting civilians in Gaza, so much for a ceasefire. On Wednesday, at least 28 people, including women and children, were killed. Now, Israel says, yes, we did this, but they were aiming at our own soldiers, even though no Israeli soldiers were harmed or killed. And they did not, as usual, provide proof that Palestinian civilians were firing on them first. Earlier today, they launched airstrikes, so not just gunfire, but now it's airstrikes. The IDF says this was Hamas infrastructure, and they were not aware of civilian casualties, but there were reportedly casualties, including 3 people and an infant, and at least 15 others wounded. Now, even if they were aiming at Hamas infrastructure, that does violate the terms of the ceasefire. Are we going to let them get away with that? Probably yes, but we are bringing in an expert, Scott Horton, the author of Enough Already and from antiwar.com. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to be with you.
You too. Now, according to Antiwar's count, this brings the death toll to 300 since the ceasefire. So why are we still playing this fun game that we have a ceasefire at all?
It's just politics. I mean, I don't know. And maybe my sphere is pretty limited on this, but I don't know anyone who thinks that this whole thing is going to be seen through to the end and there's going to be, a honestly rebuilt Gaza Strip for the Palestinian people and will be allowed to go back to anything like the status quo ante here. The Israelis, I think they know that with Donald Trump, they can get away with it. Maybe they need to wait a little while. As the saying goes, I'm pretty sure this saying originates in Tel Aviv. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So at some point, they'll just go ahead and wreck the ceasefire deal. I'm sorry, I'm a broken record, and I forget if I said this on your show previously or not, but essentially all we have here really going for us is Donald Trump's ego, that he promised that he solved this, and that if it falls apart, if enough of that blame is going to fall on him that it makes him look bad, then he's going to do what it takes to prevent it. But then again, if he thinks he could just align with the Israelis and blame it on the Palestinians and say, well, Hamas shouldn't have fired that rocket then, or they should have prevented Egyptian Islamic Jihad from firing one, or whatever kind of pretext, and he thinks he can get away with that, then I would expect him to eventually go along. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to normalize the idea here or whatever. I'm wary of putting this out into the world, but I guess my great fear is that by the end of Trump's term here, that they will have launched a massive cleansing campaign in the West Bank and essentially will go for broke while they think that strike while the iron is hot, because ultimately, right. I mean, really, who's literally going to stop them at this point? It's only the Arab states' pressure on Trump's pressure on Netanyahu to not do it. But when it comes time to just go for it, I could see them just bombing the Palestinian cities of the West Bank and trying to force all those people to flee into Jordan or something like that before the next American election. So it's going to take all the pressure from the anti-war left and anti-war right and libertarians and everybody else in this country to forge a consensus against any more intervention on the side of Israel there. Let them know they will not have our support if they go that far. And Trump has said that before, but I'm saying he needs to know that he has no room to back away from that. And it ain't just the Saudi kings and so forth. It's the American people who will not stand for that.
Right. I mean, you said you don't know anyone who thinks the ceasefire deal will hold. I introduce you to Mike Huckabee's latest tweet.
Oh, no.
It's like, he says, oh, no, it's going to hold, right? And so we see right now this stronghold of propaganda that is just assuring us that it's moving forward. And it's like air. Like, you can't sit on it. You can't look at it. You can't smell it. There's nothing there except pure propaganda. At the same time now, Israel's looking at the expiration of a weapons deal with the United States and trying to extend it by 20 years. And we're told, I think I read this on Anti-War, well, it could be the last time, the last 20 years. What do we do with that? The last 20 years is, a next generation.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, this has always been the first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to American military support and foreign aid for Israel, and military aid particularly. They phased out the civilian foreign aid in the late 1990s. It's all military aid. But the thing is, in our Constitution, in Article 1, the Congress is explicitly forbidden from appropriating money to the military for any period of more than 2 years. And that is explicitly to discourage militarism. And yet, James Madison and the guys never figured that we're going to be supporting foreign states' national armies, and that the Congress would be perfectly willing, and the American people would somehow stand for the Congress being willing to make appropriations of money on a 20-year at a time basis, 10 times the limit that they're allowed to appropriate money to our own Pentagon. It's really just, on the face of it, it's so preposterous and so contrary to having a constitutional government, right? It's just the absurdity of it all. When, as Matt Walsh said, and he works for Ben Shapiro, but he says to Tucker Carlson, he goes, if a country needs America to support its military, then it's not a viable country. And now you could add nuance to that. I would argue that if Israel didn't have America's support, then they would just have to make peace with their neighbors, and they would have to act much more like a normal country in a normal time and place, rather than this insane kind of clean breakian peace through strength, which is not peaceful at all, but endless war against their poor Palestinian captives and occasionally their neighboring states, of course, especially Lebanon and Syria. Right. And so I think if we just backed off, I think the post-48 Israel is probably a fait accompli. It's just the occupation that would have to end. It'd be the permanent brutality and aggressive stance against all their neighbors that would have to end. Right. Which would be better for Israel as well as for all their neighbors and for the United States.
Now, you recently wrote a book called Provoked, How Washington Started the Cold War with Russia. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you your take on the latest ceasefire and peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky says he has received it. It would, as predicted, give Russia the territory that they already control. That there's no way that Ukraine can ever win that. Do you think, and I mean, I guess, fool me once, but do you think that this is a viable plan that might actually end the war?
Well, I hate this stuff when it's all like kind of right in limbo. We just don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you what happened before. I'm not as good at speculating. I am, I guess, very hopefully pessimistic here. I don't really see how this can work because there's so many reasons why it can't. On the basic level, the Russians are winning, but slowly. But now you're going to tell them to call it off when they're short of their goals? When they can achieve their goals, it's simply a matter of time. Right. So now they're going to stop fighting basically as a favor to Donald Trump because he promised he could make them somehow? They don't have a much better reason to stop than that. And the Ukrainians, of course, they're losing, but slowly. And they still stand on about 1/4 of Donetsk Oblast. They don't want to turn around and walk away from that. They still control about 1/3 of Zaporozhye and 1/3 of Kherson on the other side of the river, where the Russians are in no position currently to make, any giant move, across to take the rest of Kherson. So the Ukrainians would be asked then to turn around and walk away from territory they still control. Now, under one version of the deal, from what I read about I don't know if this is the fact, but the original reports had it that the Russians might be willing to draw the lines where they are in Zaporozhye and Kherson. And this is something that they had floated this previously, say a month ago. They talked about this, and the Wall Street Journal had reported that they heard that from the Kremlin, not from the White House, that there were someone in Russia had said that maybe they would draw the line in Zaporozhye and Kherson. If you're picturing the map of Ukraine now, this would be all the territory to the east of Crimea, the whole Azov coast there, and the so-called land bridge guaranteeing Russian access from the Donbass region, which is Donetsk and Luhansk, across Zaporozhye and Kherson to Crimea, and would guarantee their freshwater access to the Dnieper River, which is something the previous government had cut off and which the Russians restored as soon as they invaded in 2022. So all that is done. And as you said in your opening question, everybody knows the Ukrainians cannot roll back Russian gains at this point. The only question is, can we get them to call a timeout when neither side is where they want to be?
Right.
And
I believe part of the deal is still an American presence there which is something Russia has long since objected to, is
some kind of security guarantee.
Yeah, peacekeepers or whatever. We're going to stormtroopers.
So I haven't seen that much detail of it. You're ahead of me on the details there. I mean, if they're talking about putting, did you say they talk in there about putting American forces on the ground there?
I think it was security forces or like temporary, the way that, I mean, who knows, right? But Russia has long since rejected anything of the sort.
Yeah.
So if that's in there, then that is very much pee in the pool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Russians, this war was started for, first of all, the ongoing civil war in the East that they were determined to solve. And then secondly, the ongoing promise and move toward full NATO expansion into Ukraine, and then the threat of American military forces being stationed there as well. And so that was the line that the Russians had drawn. So they have insisted since the start of the war that terms for Ukraine's surrender will include permanent neutrality baked into their constitution, written into their constitution, as well as America and NATO forswearing NATO membership for Ukraine and promising to end their previous quest to bring them in. And so for them to stop short of those concessions on the part of the West in Kiev, I would be amazed, right? It's not like they are in the financial crisis that Joe Biden promised to inflict on them. No, in fact, they are doing okay. And they have price inflation and things are not perfect. The war ain't free and the Russians are paying the cost for it. But it's one they, literally speaking, can't afford. Unlike us, who spent probably 3 times as much as them, and our side still loses anyway.
Yeah. There's a quote by Calvin Coolidge. He says, every dollar that we carelessly waste means that the working class's life will be so much more meager. So we are living that. We're experiencing that. Scott Horton, thank you so much for joining us. I guess, in terms of Trump's peacekeeping, he's not getting an A+. He's not honor society right now. We're not that impressed.
But I will give him credit that he really is sincere about trying to find a way to end this war in Ukraine. I just think he got inaugurated at just the wrong time to be able to tie this up. And if he can get this done, if he and Witkoff can get this done, then let us all celebrate him as Trump the Great for at least a day or a week or something, because he'll have really earned it if he does see this through.
Right. Well, I mean, if we put these two wars together, like a ceasefire in Ukraine could hold far more likely than a ceasefire in Gaza.
I agree with that. Yes.
That's just the reality of it, right? So
because Putin is Putin and Netanyahu is Netanyahu. That's why.
Exactly. All right. Yeah. Well, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on Redacted. Scott Horton, follow him on X, antiwar.com, and the great book Provoked. And enough already.
Are you going to talk about the Scott Horton Academy?
We are premium members of the, or whatever you called the lifetime membership of the Scott Horton Academy. We should tell people, if you want to research global conflicts, that's where you should start. Just launched a couple weeks ago.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, guys. It's a brand new project. I've been working on it all year. It's similar to Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. It's me doing a very long form course on the Middle East. And then I also have the great James Bovard on 40 years of investigative journalism, Ramzi Baroud on A Palestinian's Take, the real history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, William Bupert, who's a former Army officer, on America's history of military failure since the Second World War. And we got more coming, including C.J. Kilmer on how Woodrow Wilson is the worst person who ever lived because he's the father of Hitler and Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. And also this guy, Adam Francisco, who is a Lutheran professor from Concordia University, who I think as early as next week, we will be publishing his long-form course, Debunking Christian Zionism, which I know everyone is going to be so interested in. And we got goodies, too. If you get the lifetime membership, you get a free copy of Enough Already, and you get a nice little notebook and things like that. And we've got nothing but great feedback from the thing so far. People are adding it to their homeschool curriculums. And awesome. I'm getting lots of great messages and stuff. So it's really great. ScottHortonAcademy.com for people who want to check that out.
Yeah, I actually, we have the notebook. And I asked Ramzi, I'm like, should I give this to my kids? Can my teenagers go through the Israel-Palestine one? And he's like, you do it first. So I'm making my way through it and then I will see. But I think that at 15, my son is ready. So, yeah.
And sure. Ramzi is just great. I mean, I could not have done better than to pick him to host
He's amazing.
that course. It's just fantastic. fantastic. I know people get so much out of it for sure.
So ScottHortonAcademy.com, correct?
Yes, sir.
Check it out. Check it out. We need, especially for like homeschool families, like want to really learn the truth about what happened and what's going on. This is the great place to go. Scott, great to see you as always.
Absolutely. Thank you both.